what we know, two distinct proposed ideas, scenarios, transactions. My understanding from sources is that SpaceX investors are particularly pushing this idea of a combination with Tesla. Either way, highly unusual because we thought that SpaceX was on track for an IPO mid-year. What do we need to know?
Well, they still may IPO this year. There seems to be a lot of ideas kicking around at the corporate table. It's certainly faster to do a combination between an existing public company than it is to do an IPO. It's cheaper. You don't have to have a bank come in and underwrite. You don't have to do a roadshow. But you also have real drawbacks to this. You don't get to roll the pitch. You could have a sudden share sell-off where people don't like what they see. You're building a conglomerate, which historically people have not enjoyed investing in. People don't feel that they can get enough visibility on the existing businesses. So there's a real debate to be had, even within the companies, on whether this is a good idea or not.
Loren, talk to why, for example, it might be a good idea for SpaceX and Tesla to grow closer in their interaction, because they already have a relationship, a strong one.
Yes, there's plenty of cross-pollination that already happens between SpaceX and Tesla and, all of Elon Musk's empire. And if you've noticed, he's talked a lot lately about ways in which that cross-pollination could, become more intense, right? He's spoken about Starship taking Optimus to the moon and Mars and things of that nature. There's also the option of using energy storage capabilities for these data centers in space that SpaceX or that Elon's been talking about. So there is some sense to be made in combining the companies as they already work so closely together already.
What we know is, again, two distinct scenarios are being discussed, and that's the new bit, right? They're being discussed because you have people like Chamath Palihapitiya, Bill Ackman, who have hypothesized about this anyway, Kyle. We know that Tesla has confirmed an investment in xAI just this week, $2 billion, and that SpaceX participated in an earlier round in xAI as well. Elon Inc. and a conglomerate is a bit of a regulatory headache, is it not?
Oh, it could be a massive regulatory headache. If you're looking at two companies of this size, three companies of this size, presuming everyone keeps their valuations, you're looking at trillions of dollars. That kind of market capitalization is going to attract the scrutiny of government and regulators. It can't not.
Okay, regulatory hurdles abound. And actually, just to remind viewers, and as you all have written in the story at length, things can change. None of this is set in stone. This is still work in progress.
True.
But Loren, what's also work in progress is everyone talking about wanting to put these data centers into space. And you just mentioned why there might be some sense to Tesla and SpaceX combining. But what are the hurdles to even that hypothesis, that view?
Right. So obviously a lot of this is being driven by Elon's latest grand vision of putting AI data centers into space. There's obviously a lot of pros that have been, talked about in terms of doing so. There's, depending on where you put them, there's constant access to solar energy because of where you put them in orbit. There's also a lot of space in space, and a lot of, these data centers do take up quite a lot of real estate here on Earth, and that can also come with a regulatory burden in order to get the right permits and things to do so. So there's a lot of benefits to moving to space, but there's also massive engineering challenges in order to make it work. For instance, that solar power we're talking about, we're going to need massive solar panels in order to run the kinds of data center sizes that Elon's been talking about. So that is going to be a challenge that they're going to have to work through. You're going to have to put radiators on these vehicles in order to cool them down. A lot of the infrastructure around data centers here on Earth, they need massive, cooling requirements, and that doesn't change for space because you're in a vacuum and you have to use those radiators. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it all relies on Starship, which is SpaceX's next generation vehicle, and that vehicle isn't quite ready for prime time yet either. So there's a lot to keep an eye on in order for this grand vision to play out, and obviously we will be keeping an eye on it ourselves.
Caro, just one last thing. I wrote to Elon Musk. I wrote to the board. We haven't heard back from any of the parties involved. But when Loren broke the story about SpaceX's tender being settled and the internal comms about why SpaceX was going to pursue an IPO, the CFO also said this is about dramatically ramping up capacity on those existing business lines. But our reporting was that they would need tens of billions of dollars to buy the GPUs.